This is the Lekker Rugby Pod with Harry Jones and MV Velman.
Anybody who can guess who Harry is today wins something. We'll decide what it is. It's going to be very little value, but you know what? Tell us about where you are, because I think it's fairly obvious. But anyway, I want to hear.
Yeah, I was at MV in Central Business District in London, and so within about 2 radius kilometers of here, most of the big wigs of rugby, the ones that change the rules every 5 seconds, tweak a law, they're all running around here in their pinstripes and their cranberry chinos and their elbow patches and their soft loafers. Listen, this time of year, it's cold and wet, so no one should be envious. Doing hard work, I'm sure. But, as I've always told you, we don't talk about what I do unless it's in a confessional. But I've been seeing you very busy, sir. You've been talking to everyone in the potosphere. Ringo, my mate Brett McKay from Australia, trying to get details. I saw some interview questions where you were like, so tell us about the real story about Harry.
Of course, man. I'm doing some digging here.
Origin
you don't want
story.
to tell me. How am I supposed to find out? There we go. Now, what I was, Brett's coming up soon. I'm also going to talk to Peter Stebbett from Front Row Rugby, one of our fellow YouTubers. We cry on each other's shoulders quite often, kind of a thing, It's interesting to speak. I spoke to Brett yesterday, and it was interesting. You guys, your adjustment to becoming YouTubers rather than podcasters, let me call it that. That was an interesting.
It was unintentional. We didn't mean to. We were doing the Apple and Spotify, and then we would every time we did a post mortem, instant reaction, thoughtless, brainless, devoid of any kind of rigor or statistical proof, we would pop. We get 20,000, 25,000 people watching stuff, and we're like, so maybe we should actually put together a video presentation. So that's what we're doing now.
Well, on that subject, watch out for the best of the cheers and jeers of the 8-9 combo. We're also going to publish it on our channel, yeah. So watch out for that. It's actually should be on by the time I publish this video as well, because that's the best of the stuff. And Brett was very happy. He was very proud of himself. He did a very good job at editing it. I gave him a pat on the shoulder. Well done. That's interesting. I liked it. The cheers and jeers thing is something we must talk about as well. Maybe more of a Afrikaans English version.
It's funny though. I mean, like I just watched it this morning. I didn't have any part in deciding what the best was. That was all Brett, but I thought it actually was funny. And what's interesting for you is it takes you on a march through the year of 2024, mostly from Test rugby, but there's also references to club, and it's almost a funny way of seeing all the absurdities of rugby over the year.
Yeah. It's funny. I can't do that because we had too many. I can't keep up with them. It's too long. I'll sit here for 2 weeks just trying to get the highlights together. While they're on the subject of getting the highlights together, remember to subscribe to this channel, please. Every time I ask, you respond. So that let me not forget. So it's quite important. But we had some sort of a bit of withdrawal symptoms. We so used to talk to each other at least twice a week, and then suddenly it went down to 1 and then to nothing. And you're traveling the world over. Maybe next year in a confessional we'll find out what you're doing there. But I wanted to talk to you about the level playing field, or the lack of a level playing field with South African teams competing in Europe, and the lack of the budgets on our side, and I don't want to call it overabundance of money in Europe, but not a level playing field. Jake's been banging on about it a bit. What can you tell me that can put it into context a little bit?
I don't want the audience to be worried about if there's any creative differences between us or a tiff. I mean, we good. MV and I talk all the time.
Oh yeah,
we chat off record. But I know what
December.
you mean.
Sorry, it's December. People, we're resting.
December. No, I know what you mean though. You go so great guns, and suddenly there's this vacuum, and almost always when that happens, the thoughts turn to administration, running the club. The top level, the coaches, we almost kind of instinctively revert to the people in the boardroom instead of on the pitch. The fact of the matter is that rugby is still in its infancy as a professional entertainment sports vehicle. Our deals with television are spotty and they're patchworked. They're like one of those underfunded schools or hospitals that just keeps adding on a wing. By the time it's all done, nothing makes sense. So you look at the broad panoply of broadcast deals, the differences between the wealth riches and rags, the length of deals, and then inside each competition, the gross disparity. So let's just take top 14, which is the richest. Top 14 is the richest league in rugby, and Pro D2, which is its underling, is the second richest league. And the only one that has a shot of really catching would be maybe the ERC could catch Pro D2, and maybe actually League One in Japan is going to get close because they have immense corporate sponsors. So what the French have is a TV deal that gives them between 120 million and 150 million euros per year, and it's guaranteed, as those deals tend to be. So you can plan better when you know you have your bread and butter. When you look at the 26 plus games in their competition and then a miniature playoff, that creates what broadcast partners want, which is content. They want to have a long drive. When you look at the cumulative budget of these teams, 480 million euros is the top 14 budget that's declared, that's on the books. That's for all the clubs together. How that breaks down is a team like Toulouse has between 43 and 50 million, depending on how much over the table and how much under the table you're thinking about. And when I say under the table, I mean both, expected, accepted, not dirty. And also there's some evidence in history of Stade Français, as well as Clermont, Montpellier, La Rochelle, of them being in salary cap violation. So think about that. The massive influx, the Red Disa consortium that came into Cape Town, steaming in with a 74% stake for 8 million euros, that bought them that much of a stake. So put that in context. Don't get distracted by salary cap. Think about the whole budget, because that means training, nutrition, a second field, a third field that's always dry, an indoor facility, scrum machines that cost $1 million, the whole thing, assistant coaches, a sports shrink, things that really matter. So when you look at that list of Toulouse, Stade Français, Toulon, Lyon, Clermont, La Rochelle, those 6 teams have a massive competitive advantage over Jake White and Dabo when they're trying to put together their team for the next year. They also have an advantage over the Premiership teams, because Premiership teams have a harder cap. They are usually funded by billionaires or almost billionaires that are using the club as a side venture to support their marketing. Hey, friends, let's shoot some foxes and jump some hedges and go watch our team. Come to the box with me. They don't have to make money. The French are in a capitalist sports environment where they want to make money, where they have to declare all their finances to the league, and they want bigger and bigger deals, and they're getting bigger and bigger deals. So it's interesting. It's almost like if you had Formula One and one guy got to drive the tricked out McLaren or Ferrari, and then I'm rocking up with a Yugo, but I'm a really good driver, and maybe I got a machine gun as well or something. I don't know. Like I try to win by other means. So this is what Jake and Dabo are dealing with. If you want to look across on the other side of the English channel at the English Premiership, you have kind of an age of parity, and that you have 4 or 5 teams that can switch. It's not like Saracens used to be like the Leinster of the Premiership. Now you have Saracens, Harlequins, Bristol, Bath, Sale, Northampton, and they kind of switch and ebb and flow. And they have the same problem that the French do, which is, look at the French clubs. Let's say they have 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 French internationals on their team, and then just go plug a hole. Oh, I need a lineout, Richie Gray. Oh, I need someone at the back with 2 big feet, Blair Kinghorn. I need someone who's a jackler who can play flank and center, Lovani Bottia, one of the best players in the world. I need size, Will Skelton. I need a midfield, Chocobaris. So we don't have that. None of our teams can do any of that. The closest that ever came was Hugh Jones for the Stormers. And then every now and then there'll be someone who has a yearning to play rugby somewhere else. But it's not like getting a mercenary who can shoot the eye out of a squirrel from 400 meters. So I think that's where we're facing. In the ERC, we have clearly a royalty, right? There's Leinster that always wins the regular comp, and then gets into the playoffs and stumbles. And you have guys, like you have teams like Munster, Glasgow, Bulls, Stormer, who can compete within the ERC. But when we get found out is when we have to go into these competitions where teams have 10 times the budget, and they're used to balancing 26 games in top 14, so they already know how to platoon, and they don't take every game seriously. In top 14, they often send scrubs to play someone away, and they don't care about it. They just have to always win at home, and so that model prepares them really well for the European Champions Cup.
Okay, last time you mentioned the fact that the possibility of maybe, I just joked about it, and I said, you have medical tourism guys coming over here because our medical facilities are good and they go on a holiday. Maybe you should have some of these overseas players coming here and then going to the Kruger National Park or something, or Sun City over the weekend and play some rugby here. But the point is, we want to develop more local content. Now, again, I want to get back to what Jake White's been banging on about, and that's the fact that we need to bring those overseas players back here. Because if you look at it from that angle, what he's saying rings true. We're always going to have, and he said it last week in his own words, was the difference between his number 30 player and his number 55 player, which is the size of the squad, or 56 player, is huge. Whereas, like you just mentioned, with the overseas teams, there's so much talent there that there's no real gap. To plug that gap, you're going to need to bring some of the South Africans back here, but that's never going to happen. How are they going to bridge this gap without, the money is not there. 85 million is nothing. In South African context, a lot of money, but in international terms, it's not. Rand now. How are they going to plug that gap? How are we ever going to get competitive? And I asked the same question I'm asking of a lot of people lately is, should we even be competing in the European Cup games?
I mean, no is the answer. What is good for the test format, and what is good for letting other leagues, other clubs pay our players and then use them at test level, having gained different IP, diversity of tactics, and letting them foot the bill, is exactly what's bad for a club. The Sharks can put a team on the field that looks pretty proper nowadays, but the Stormers and Bulls, you look at it and you could just tell how easy it would be if you had Handro Liebenberg, who's just tearing it up for Leicester Tigers, scored a worldie. Of course he fits into that. I mean, as a squad man, as a fourth Lucy, a captain, maybe a third Lucy. Think about the Dupree brothers. Think about people that are tearing it up in Premiership, top 14, that are clearly starting right now in the Stormers, who have directionless, rudder, top sail, blowing off. You need people who can drive a team around, and there's plenty of examples of that. So we have made a strategic decision to allow people to play anywhere they want, so that 6 of the top minutes, the top box who played the most minutes this season played overseas. 9 out of 20 were playing overseas, predominantly in Japan, where they manage their load and nutrition and expectations and vibe better, so they're not ragged out and dead by the end of each season. So it's better for test rugby. It's better for the box. So what's good for the box is good for South African rugby, and the club coaches have to accept that. They have to know about it. I don't begrudge them whining about it a bit, because it's true. So it's okay, do it. But it doesn't really change what they do on Monday morning, which is, so these are the guys I've got. Would it be nice if I had Malcolm Marks as a hooker at Stormers and maybe Peter Steptoe on the side of the scrum? Yeah, well, that'd be great. Not going to happen. And there's no world in which that happens. There is some migration back because of the ERC. If you're going to play against Celtic sides and Italian sides in that competition anyway, if the money starts to even out, and once the obligation to pay into the system, which our teams have to do, once that's evened out, there is a world in which some people migrate back. For example, like Stephen Kitsoff, even though he's injured now, that is a good example of going to Ulster and then coming back. Because if all things are equal and the money's close, there's going to be players who want to stay where they're from. where everything smells the way they like it, where it tastes the way they like it, where the seasons are lined up the way they like it. So there's that, get close. But it's not close at all for Colby. It's not close at all for Pollard. I mean, that's in a short career of 10 to 15 years, even got Pollard with a really long career. That's still just a 15-year career. And if you say the delta is $1 million for a season, and you have a baby and you have a wife and you have a life, it's crazy to turn that down. You better take it because you're one blown knee away from the whole thing being ended. So I don't begrudge the players. I don't think anyone does. I actually think the coaches just have to get their mind around it and try to find other ways to win. And I think Jake can talk about what he's talking about, and he's factually correct. But I think Jake is one of those coaches that needs to refresh. And so there's a thing about coaches. They're almost like the dominie, the preacher that has to come up with a sermon every single Sunday. How do they do it? If they have an argument with their wife on the way to church, can they still preach? They still have to, right? So a coach just has to keep going, but he might have something going on in his life. He might not even believe his speech at Oranges to his team. We're going to storm the barricades. I want you to break legs. I want everyone to give them, and inside the mic going, what am I eating for dinner tonight? So there is a point of burnout that exists in every profession. And coaches are notorious for believing that their system, which got them to the World Cup, which got them to the final, that if we just did it a little bit better, that we'd win. And it's a fallacy. Sometimes that's true, but it's not true forever. Everyone gets worked out. Ireland's attack has been worked out, for example. You can see that teams know how to slow it down, how to make it hard. I'm not saying they beat Ireland all the time, but that there's not just runaway tries anymore. You know that James Ryan is faking when he's running that hard. You know it's not going to go to him. You know it's going to go to Kalen Doris. And so everyone works out your tendencies. I think Jake White's suffering a little bit from doing the same old, and just saying do it harder. I think Dobbo is suffering from not really having a complex tactical rugby brain, but instead being one of the most likable people in the world who you would want to die for. But that only gets you so far as well, because at some point, a Glasgow or Franco Smith will sit down and say, so what could I do to throw a piece of iron in the spokes of the bicycle of the Bulls? Or how can I, put a potato in the exhaust of the Stormers? And how can I mess it up? And that you need time away. You need to do a different counter of your counter ruck. You need to think about how you come in on the defense on the sides. You need to have different presentation. That takes being away for a month and looking at something completely different. You're just sitting around looking, you're in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and you're looking at a ship getting loaded and something comes to your brain. You go, wow, those guys are throwing bricks up onto that, embankment, and there's something different about it. All of them will tell you stories about why they coach the way they do, but what they don't tell you is in year 20 that they've run out of ideas. And so that's where I think we're in trouble. And we also don't have the money. This is where money comes in as well. The assistant coaches for a team like Leinster, who do they have as assistant coaches? I mean, my God, they have some of the best coaches in the whole world that are assistants.
Yep, World Cup winning coaches.
Yes, so that makes a big difference too. I can go to my coach, hey Leo, I've got an idea. Head coach says, get out of my office. No, he goes, hey Jacques Nienaber, I think I've listened to you. You have the best defense at the highest level for 5 years. So I think that's also happening. I also think that sometimes you get inspiration from other sports. So it's not always that you just have to study rugby, watch the video of Bulls Saracens until your eyes bleed, and you keep watching and watching and watching, and you say, oh, look, on the 4-man line out, okay, whatever. You can do that, but next week the team will do something different anyway.
Well, my eyes bleed anyway. I didn't have to replay. I played the first time. It was a terrible game. So yeah, I'm interested to see whether Jay picks up on what we were saying about that. That's going to be interesting. I wanted to ask you about that. Do you think I've made the mistake of playing a bit of Tetris. Now, you would know what happens when you play Tetris. As I'm talking to you, I see these little blocks in front of my head, and as the levels go down. And while I was thinking about that is a bit of a convoluted analogy, but the point is that, here's the Springboks, and here's everybody else. So for now, like a guy like Damien and JC and Andre and everybody, they're coming from 2015. We spoke to Heineken May the other day. He's a guy who brought him in. He also mentioned me like Johan Goosen, who had a shocker of a game against Saracens. He made him a Springbok at the age of 20. The point I'm trying to make is when these older, stars of the Springboks fall away, when they go away, when the 15-year careers are now finally over. Is there enough depth here for that gap to be filled up, or is it going to fall? You know where I'm going with this? Because it's not sustainable. If you don't, yes, you can have players playing in Japan. Yes, you can have players playing in the Premiership. And there's a lot of talent. Like there's a big debate about Jan Augustus now. Maybe, why don't we pick him for the Springboks? Or what's that guy, the fullback's name, Tyrone Green and the likes. The point is, if they don't look after the game in South Africa, local franchises, to be able to fill up this whatever you want to call it, there's going to be a problem in a year or two's time, or maybe 3 or 4 years' time. The point is, this is not sustainable. I don't think so.
I'm a little bit more optimistic about this issue. I'm bullish. Sorry to use your bulls.
I like it. No, keep it up, man.
And here's why. I think there's 3 different channels that South African rugby depends on that is not replicated in a place like Argentina. In Argentina, if you're a good player, you're a promising loose forward like Juan Martin Gonzalez, you don't play at your school so much as you play at a club. The club is a sports club. It has racket sports. It has polo. It's usually a little bit elite, upper class. He goes there and he plays rugby. He pays a fee. At some point, someone at that club says to a coach at an actual rugby club, a professional club, hey, this is a young kid. He's really good. They have to make that happen. And almost immediately, they talk about, well, what if you played somewhere else, like in the French league or in UK? And the chances are that that's where his trajectory will be. Think about that from a South African point of view. You actually can stay in schools rugby all the way to the end without having to move. The rugby at the highest level, in the top 10, top 20 SA schools is on the same level as many other countries' professional clubs. Not maybe as big size-wise yet, but not that different when you actually see the schoolboys now. Then you have varsity, and some of the varsity talent, like a Kurtley Arnsa, gets discovered. I think Sabu Nkosi was that way. I think there's another example. There's several examples of people who didn't make it at, they were not, recruited at 16 to go into junior Western Province or junior Bulls. And then you get into the levels of competition at senior level. So you have all these stacked layers where the catchment system of catching all the talent, the water, like don't let the rainfall go. Where is it? Got it. And so you don't have as many examples of a guy like Emmanuel Miafu, was born in Melbourne, Australia, and he now appears in the top 50 of the Rugby Class's best rugby players in the world. Couldn't get a contract at the Melbourne Rebels. How funny is that, right? Because they don't see enough of it. There's not any club level and schools level of notes in Australia that you can watch those festivals and those rankings and on television. So I think we're still spotting it. Now, the next part of it, I agree with you, it goes quickly. The Paul Willemse syndrome, it goes somewhere. So that's lost to us. But I'm not sure if you have the right coaching core that you're losing the ones that you couldn't afford to lose. I'm not sure. I'm not aware of an example except for Paul Willemse where someone was kind of a sure thing. Like he would have probably been in the system. I don't know if he would have been starting, but he would have been there. So then you get into so maybe what we're doing is we have a farm system. This is going to sound insulting, but maybe a team like the Lions is just a farm club for the greater individual wealth of players and collective wealth of rugby writ large in South Africa, because you're still finding enough, still competitive, Cheetahs, Lions, from time to time the Sharks. But there's really just 2 clubs that we look at and say, even with all your disadvantages, even though you're 1/10 of the budget of these other players, other teams, our players are good enough to pull off the Cinderella story. Maybe, maybe not. I think we can do it in the ERC because we've shown 3 finals. We haven't shown it in the Championships Cup, right? The Champions Cup is a different animal because now you're getting into almost World Cup knockout workload, and you got to have 50 players. Like you say, the players 35 to 50 is what gets you.
I wanted to ask you, I'm glad you raised this now, the farming thing. In New Zealand, players are allocated to the teams by the central governing body, if I'm not mistaken. And I wanted to ask you, from being from America, the draft thing, the NFL draft, I mean, it's very convoluted. I don't understand it. Wouldn't something like that work maybe, where talent comes through and it gets allocated to to the franchises so that everybody gets a fair chance and that the resources are distributed equally? I don't want to sound like a politician or anything, but the point is that, a lot of the power is concentrated at the Bulls or the Stormers or the Sharks for that matter. Maybe it's not a bad idea for the sustainability of this thing to maybe whatever we've got distributed evenly, player-wise, I mean.
Yeah, so if your topic is about the integrity of club competition, that you're really looking at a vibrant competition where you'd never know, it's not like a premiership in football where it's always Liverpool, Man U, Man City, Everton, that kind of thing. We want to avoid that, where anybody from anywhere can win. That is the model that American sports franchises use. And look at the NBA, how different the champion is. Look at the NFL, how quickly that cycle moves. Is because they use a socialist principle, which is ironic. That's when they're one of the loudest proponents of capitalism, is incredibly socialistic when it comes to the system. And the draft is the fulcrum of that. So worst team gets highest pick. And there are transformational players. So like, take it Australia as an example, like Joseph Akuso Suali'i. He's clearly the best young player in Australia. So he would go to the worst team. The Western Force would be able to get him. But that's not going to happen, right? It's always going to go to the richest club. Leinster always gets the best players. They have the best players in Ireland, and they get Archie Snyman and Geordie Barrett. So we have it all kind of messed up. I think you're onto something in that the South African system would be the most conducive to using the American draft, the camps they have where they test, where you run your 40 meters, where you do your vertical leap, you do your bench press, because South African schools are more akin to the football factories of America, where you have, high school teams with state-of-the-art facilities, where 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people are coming to watch you on Friday nights. The level of athleticism forever, the supply of it is massive. And your real problem is just we don't want to miss the next great talent. We don't want to miss the Cheslin Colby that may not be at the proper rugby school, the top rugby school, but that that system can unearth them, because scouts are actually timing you, watching you, skin fold, fat percentage, the Wonderlic test or the successor to it, Rugby IQ. If we did that, then at least you would be able to think of a level playing field within South Africa. That may not be to the liking of the royalty, the Bulls and the Stormers, because we quite liked it that in the end we're more like the Liverpool and Man U.
I wouldn't like it. I immediately feel myself objecting to my own idea here. But the point is,
I object to myself.
Yeah, sustained. There we go. No, I wanted to ask you that because there's a glaring flaw in this entire thing. Like you just mentioned, Joseph Suali'i will go to the Western Force. I was going to say, stuff this, I'm going to Leicester Tigers. I'm going to play, yeah. That's it's
open. It's an open system, right? There's no.
Yeah.
So all the US sports are played only in the US. I mean, the ones we're talking about, and so you have a closed system. You have franchises, and you could essentially look at the NFL as one employer, and the commissioner is the actual boss, and all the investors, we'll call them owners, but they're really just investors in their teams. They have to follow the rules, and they have no way around it. There's a collective bargaining agreement. And everything is pretty much dictated that way. And the owners have made a solemn agreement with each other contractually, but also emotionally, that the best thing for the league is to have forever parity, never have dynasties. Rugby is a dynastic sport. You can look at every country and you know exactly who the top teams are, and the Blazers at those places want it to be like that forever. And so they are entrenched. Just like we are in Test rugby, we want the same teams to be the top. And we don't like a world in which suddenly Spain and Brazil are the best. We just don't like that. It makes us think that's not rugby. We don't like money coming from certain sources. We're very kind of stuck in a conservative view. So we're not fully professionalized. So what I would say to Jake, Dobbo, and Western Province is when they're looking at these things, don't lose the talent. Like I think Dobson should be in the high. I think we should promote him to the top office and be a full-time promoter and booster of rugby. But I've always thought, and I said this jokingly, but I think it maybe became serious. A guy like Heineke Meyer, who you had that excellent interview with, he'd be perfect for Stormers because he would bring that set piece fundamentalism, map out your 6 plays, don't play in the wrong areas. Because right now, Stormers are trying to play Harlem Globetrotters from everywhere in the world, and it looks sick. It looks disgusting, and it doesn't even look like rugby. So I think there has to be some analytics applied. And I think Dobbo's just kind of doing the play harder, boys, express yourself.
Well, you want to, promote or reward mediocrity. I don't want to call it mediocrity. It's a very strong word. I'm just saying, I think he's to a degree been found out more than a question of refreshment. I get what you're saying with Jake, to a degree needing some refreshment. The point is, he can't compete, no matter how innovative you are and how refreshed you are and how many months you spent on Zanzibar's beach or whatever, and coming back and fighting with your one hand tied behind your back. I mean, that's just not, it's never going to happen. That's not sustainable or realistic.
That's fair. Let's take tennis, for example. It's a sport that I know a lot about, so I'll kind of dig in there. When you look at 15 years of tennis, going back from now, there were some big figures in men's tennis, and the differences between Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic in number of points won, I mean, it comes down to about 10 or 15 each out of 10,000 points. They all had different styles. Federer had more money. Federer had more money from the beginning. He had more money because his sponsorship deals were different. So he could live in Dubai, play tennis on top of a giant skyscraper, eat, the most perfect food. But he didn't always beat Nadal, who just played blue-collar tennis, just, sweated and lifted weights and ran. And the money doesn't always decide it. So I'm not saying it doesn't hurt, but there are some ways you can make someone come down to your level. Andy Murray actually scored some really famous victories, and he was never an attacking player. He had a nothing serve. He was just the guy you couldn't beat because he got everything back. So all I'm saying is Jake has to play the hand he's dealt. And what would that look like? It would be forcing some of these high dollar, glitzy, 50 million euro clubs to play worse. How do you do that? You drag them into a swamp. You say, we're not going to fight in the field with the perfectly drained turf. We're going to fight down here in the docks, and there's going to be things coming at you from everywhere. I thought Glasgow showed some of that when they played the Bulls. They came to Loftus a year ago, and they did everything to make the Bulls not work. And I think that Jake is still smarting from that. I think there's still he hasn't gotten over it. And maybe I like that. Maybe that's gonna make him win because he's so motivated. It can backfire. Eddie Jones was obsessed with the Springboks from 2019, and from that point on, his career went into the tank and into the sewer and into the toilet. Because he was so obsessed with it, he hired the wrong coach, Matt Proudfoot, who was not the best one to hire. He never really understood why he lost. I mean, in his book, he writes about the Lucid prop Frans Malherbe. I go, dude, like how many times did you check your text before you printed that? You don't know he's a tight head? Like that's your problem. You're not winning scrums because you don't even respect the scrum. So Eddie never respected the scrum. That's why he lost. I don't know why exactly Jake's not performing up to where he wants to. It's not that far off, let's be honest. Still top 10 club in the world. But you would think that he has to figure that out. And I think the problems start and go and they finish at playmaker at 10. That's where I don't think Buta Chamberlain and Johan Goosen are
No.
the second coming.
Well, if you understand Afrikaans, watch the video between me and Andre. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to people watching this video. We talked about Johan Goosen not wanting to be there. That seems to be the common consensus about journalists writing about that game. Is Johan Goosen didn't want to be there. That raises a whole new slew of questions. But yeah, I wanted to ask you something else. You mentioned about the team bosses in America having some sort of a gentleman's agreement or contractual agreement or whatever about parity and everything else. But the word I want to focus in on there is the team bosses side of it. And you remember who was the guy that CEO Kolisi played for at Rugby 92? They said he was fat and overweight and a ghost.
Jackie Marzatti or something.
So that guy. And to a degree, Marco Mazzotti at the Sharks, similar thing. Don't we need team bosses, strong, kind of a guy who takes almost like a dictator, talking about politics again, but taking control of the thing and sort of pushing and steering and that guy. And less of these investors and more of a sort of a guy that takes the thing by the scruff of the neck and wring the life out of it. Somebody who takes real control, not the coach, but control of the union itself and finance and everything.
At club level, there's evidence for what you say. Crusaders was the most successful club in the Southern Hemisphere, and Colin Mainsbridge runs that thing. And he had a very tight relationship with the coach, Razor Robertson. You knew exactly who was in charge of that club for the 10 years where they won 8 times. Look at Leinster. There is a boss structure. Like, you don't go out of line. The players, they know exactly what's happening, and then who's got their back. In all of the French teams that we've mentioned, let's just take Toulouse, which is the most glaring. There is definitely, in my way, the highway. Like, they're brutal. Like, they'll cut someone. So in American sports, you miss a field goal, they cut you. You're not allowed to miss. There's no, give money a few more games. Like, you're just gone. There's someone in the wings.
Yeah.
So there is that. Now, if everyone understands that that's how brutal it is, then fine. So it's more effective. But you lose a bit of the humanity side of it. So I think that's the price you pay, and that's the devil's bargain. So now at national level, not really. I think you have boards that are faceless, nameless. The best run, like Ireland, you don't know who's the president of their union.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever even heard his name? You're not going to. They're just, quiet. Same thing with New Zealand. They don't like any scandals. They don't want the strong man at the head. They don't want the strong man of history theory. They just want a trend, and they want good coaches, and they want continuity. So I think you're looking at one more example of club versus country, where rugby at the club level is a different animal than rugby at test.
No, I think that's glaringly obvious. I wanted to latch onto the word you used, just said, waiting in the wings. And that's a major problem in South African teams just now. We talked about Goosen performing badly against Saracens and actually not doing his job. Let's call a spade a spade. Now, in typical, Andre mentioned that he played against Ireland and he missed a kick or something, and Jake dropped him next game. They made no bones about it that he was dropped because he didn't perform well enough. There's, like, Storm has got the same problem. They've got so many injuries. There's no depth there. So, okay, even if you don't perform, we can't drop you because there's nobody to replace you with. So it becomes a little bit more lackadaisical. I'll try another time, like you just mentioned. That's a bigger problem that can build in itself. That depth is not there, so that sort of complacency starts creeping in, and at the end of the day, it just drags the whole system down.
Yeah, when you make excuses, so every sports team that I've ever been a part of that was successful, we didn't make excuses. We're like really honest in the cloakroom, change room, locker room. You stand there, you're naked literally, and you're telling your teammates, I dropped the ball. I messed up. And you see that in all the best teams. Why did the All Blacks kind of take a step back and maybe fall back? Now they're coming back again, but because they started making excuses and they started saying it's okay. It's okay to drop 2 to South Africa. And so if they're going to come right, they will say it's not okay. And they have to beat us in Eden Park. I do think there's an element of that. I think the Lions they're brave, they're plucky, they fight really hard, but they're not really going to go anywhere. The Sharks do have a proper roster, and they've underperformed, punched way under their weight for years. And I do think Marco, is a friend of mine. I think he's got a plan, and he does think branding matters. And the branding has to be not just about family values, come to our stadium and you can have nice stuff and it's going to be fun. You can swim in the pool while you watch. It's got to be about winning. It's got to be about the knife's edge of competition where everything is beautiful when you win and everything stinks when you lose. It's got to be like that, or there's no point in putting your boots on.
Yeah. Yeah, we can talk another 2 hours about this, I suppose. Anyway, talking about the Bulls quickly against Northampton Saints this weekend. I mean, I didn't really follow any international rugby until I started speaking to you. Now I know the Saints are actually the Premier League champions, the Premiership
Yes.
champions, and it's going to be a huge game. We've got a score to settle from last season's hiding that we got when we sent the second team. And that's something else I wanted to talk to you about. But just briefly about that Northampton Saints Bulls game. What can we expect, do you think? Remember, when we set up this meeting, I told you I was wandering around in the street outside waiting for a courier and almost dying in the heat because it's 36 degrees as we speak. Yeah, it's ridiculous temperatures. What do you think is going to happen?
Actually, I like that message you gave me. You can't grow a brain, eh? Well, I mean, here's the thing about these Champions Cups is you have to play the game. You have to send modified rosters, but then it has to work. Like here's the thing: you look stupid when it doesn't work. When you play that game and it backfires on you, you look like an idiot. You look like the courier that you just met. But when it works and you're La Rochelle and you did it, and you tank a lot of games in your domestic season, and all you care about is winning the home games and finding your best 23, but you don't care where you finish in the top 14, really, unless you're, top 5, top 6. But then you put together a Springbok-like run in the World Cup where you win by one, it looks good. So our teams haven't figured out the recipe yet. And before we talk about travel, that's essentially ameliorated by the IRC. I mean, you only play within your shield, and so you actually don't have as much. You have not nearly as much travel as in Super Rugby. It's quantitatively different. So you still have to, but you have to play that game. You've got to figure out. You got to sit down like whoever is managing the spreadsheets of Rossi, and you look at player load, and you derive a pattern, and you play it out. But you sometimes have to circle a fixture and you say, and that's the one we steal. Because if you beat the Saints, a lot of good things happen for you in that log. Stormers are facing similar Hobson's choices, not Dobson's choices, where you have to say, I don't have a good choice here. I'm going to take the least worst. And that's hard edge. I think the French or clubs like Munster have been doing this for a long time, and they're comfortable. Their fan base is comfortable with them sending a team that's kind of fed to the slaughter.
Yeah, but that's what the other thing I wanted to talk to. I'm glad you sort of raised it, incidentally, is the fact that they can get away with it. But when the Bulls sent a second stream or an alternative team to play the Saints last season, all hell broke loose. I mean, it was like, not.
It's because we knew. That's it. So there was already a built-in resistance to having South African teams in the first place, and so this is just an esoteric complaint. It's not the real thing. The real thing is we don't want you in here because it's not a European competition anymore. Because and we're scared you're going to win. That if once you get the recipe together, a la Erasmus, then you're going to keep winning, and so everyone takes one step back. The Welsh they take one step back. The English teams they already know that the best players man for man are from the Pacific Islands and from South Africa, and New Zealand. So they know that over time, if the economy keeps growing, the nation's population keeps growing, some of these hiccups are worked out. If you had to put all your money, 20 years from now, who's winning the Champions Cup? South Africa's a nice long odds. I go with them 3-1, 4-1. French should be 2-1 still, but they will go up. So I think when the Bulls did that, it was a target on their back, and they was like, see, they're out of their depth, and they didn't respect the competition. That's all bullshit. So they are strategic in their own way. All the French teams circle matches where they literally say, it doesn't matter. We don't care if we win this one.
Yeah, that's the point. They get away with it. You talked about the TV rights. I thought, the TV guy is going to demand their pound of flesh. It's going to be a best team every weekend coming in. It's not. It's not like that. But when it comes to South African side, it's the complete opposite. Why not playing this guy? Why not playing that guy? Why are you disrespecting the competition, like you just said? But I hear you. I understand where you're coming from. That it makes sense to me. So, and just the other big game of the weekend, I think. For me, the Stormers have run their season, URC and Champions Cup. I don't think they're going to get anywhere. They need to start rebuilding and just sort of seeing what they can fix in the meantime. Sharks play Leicester Tigers. To me, that's a huge game. Michael Cheika is nobody's fool. That's going to be a big one. Are you going to be around? Going to watch it?
Yeah, I'll watch that. I'm not in person. Welford Road is a wonderful place to go, though. Everyone who can be there, and there's a lot of staffers living in the area. I think Jared Wright's going to be there. No, it's great fun. Pollard, guys like Freddie Stewart in there, Julian Montoya, Liebenberg. It's going to be fantastic. But by the way, the Stormers will rise from the ashes just when you doubt us the most. A giant killing, table rocking, mountainous, volcanic history will come forth, and we will storm into the playoffs. You'll see. We have there's no way in the Urk. There's no way. I'm already written off. We're done.
But you only need to win 2 games in the Champions Cup in the playoffs to make the knockouts. You're right.
That's all I'm telling my players. Hey, we just put 2 or 3 together. We throw these ridiculous speculators, and one of them's going to stick. And Water Kalant's going to do something. He's going to throw. He's going to throw the ball between his legs. Under the shoe, and it's going to land up in the right place.
Between his legs intentionally this time. The point I'm trying to make with the Stormers is they were out-muscled, man. And that to me is a bigger concern than anything else. The French were more physical than the South African team, and that's a bit of a frightening thing if you ask me.
That was a dirty game, eh? I'm not here. Listen, before anyone says that I'm crying or whining, I like that. I mean, but if there's going to be a game where we're breaking legs and arms, I want to be the guy breaking the legs and arms. I don't want my legs broken. And Toulon came in with that same mentality that the Irish did in Durban.
Yeah.
We're going to be breaking legs today, and it's going to be your legs, not mine.
Yes, it was hectic. Anyway, at least it looks like it's going to get a bit of rain over here. I hope so. So anyway, what's it like over there? You're going off on a bit of a holiday?
It's cold. It's gray. People look like they're a little bit depressed.
Maybe I was reminded we've got some nice beaches here, in South Africa.
Next year we're coming.
Yeah, I know you are. All right. Thanks, Eddie. Appreciate it. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
This is the Lekker Rugby Pod with Harry Jones and Envia Velman.